clear. Go.
Welcome back to another Cyberpunk 2077 lore discussion focusing on the Rocker Boys. Alongside Johnny Silverhand and the Samurai, I will also be covering other notable individuals and groups that influenced the Rocker Boy movement of Cyberpunk 2020. The history leading up to Mike Pondsmith's vision of cyberpunk mirrors our own in that music often reflected the ignorance and hedonism of race, violence, and knee-jerk liberalism that led to massive music sales during the 80s and 90s. The Rocker Boy movement demonstrated an intensity of artistic commitment nearly unparalleled in human history. Some have achieved a great deal, others have not. The only reason that Rocker Boys don't have a greater effect is probably an inability to stay alive long enough to achieve their goals. If the term Rocker Boy defines the level of commitment involved in getting the message to the people, then the general consensus is that the first Rocker Boy would be James Manson. Manson is often considered the definitive rocker because his death in 1997 defined the term. Although Manson's career was considered by several commentators as mediocre at best, it can be argued that his real accomplishment was to expose the opposition of those in power to the Rocker Boy ideal. Like many other performers of the period, Manson was afraid to perform in America because of death threats by the military government. These threats, in fact, were one of the very issues being discussed at the Amnesty International concert, where Manson was killed by armed British security. His death galvanized a whole generation of people to become rockers in their own right. Following this event, one of the first groups to come out of the political closet was Justifiable Homicide, an interesting name to say the least. Their first album, released in 1998 and titled Jury Trial, was a great success both commercially and as a Rocker Boy statement. Many modern rockers recall their parents playing the disc when they were very young. The message of Jury Trial was one of nostalgia, a real longing for the now defunct criminal justice system. Barry Mayung, the lead vocalist and songwriter, had lost a good part of his family to the military government, executed for what he considered trivial looting charges. It was more than 10 years before Justifiable Homicide released their second album. Those years were spent running from the government. Late in 1999, a group of militant Catholic rockers called the Watchmen released 2 albums, Sign of the Times and Revelation. The albums had strong political content and fabulous musicianship. Even the harshest critics agreed that the group was headed for stardom. Then, in April of 2000, all 6 members of the band were tried in absentia for crimes against the government and were arrested 6 weeks later by the USMG, accused of treason, espionage, terrorism, transportation of illegal war material, and possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. It had been determined by reactionary members of the government that the Watchmen were attempting to subvert a large group of citizens. When apprehended, instead of being executed, the members of the band were incarcerated at Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, where they stayed for almost 13 years. Beginning with the Watchmen trial, the military government made sure that volatile rockers had short careers. Until the return to civilian rule, no one was safe. The period between 1999 and 2009 is called the lost decade by many rock historians. Although there were many powerful rockers in this period, their careers were short-lived. After the return to civilian government in 2008, the music scene virtually exploded, with Johnny Silverhand and Kerry Eurodyne leading the charge with the band Samurai. Since 2006, the Samurai released 6 albums. The band broke up in early 2008, but that was not the end for Samurai. Silverhand and Eurodyne would both have highly influential solo careers. Johnny Silverhand would literally become the definition of a rocker boy. It was not that the new rocker boy was any less committed to the idea of art over life. The new generation simply was smart enough to stay alive. The lost 90s band Justifiable Homicide had been hiding out in Mexico City for almost 6 years. After tiring of the constant pursuit by thugs of the military government, the band had gone to work playing the rough crowds of construction workers. Mexico City was being rebuilt, and a large portion of the workforce were American nomads, so the band had a following. By 2011, however, the band was on a slow downward spiral. It was only a matter of time before they burned out. Former samurai Bess Isis was in town doing a piece on the Nomad Underground. She was in the bar having a drink talking with the band when an emaciated 16-year-old kid walked into the bar and fell flat. Revived by Bess Isis, he told the story of 600,000 people marooned in South America. Some of them were trying to get out by walking almost 3,000 miles to get home. The story was well documented, and Bess Isis was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. The members of Justifiable Homicide stole 6 truckloads of perishables and supplies and went to meet the nomads, who had begun the long walk. The band and Isis as well joined in the walk. For 6 months the band lived and worked with the nomads. 2 members died in the violent clashes along the way. These experiences went into Justifiable Homicide's second major label release, The Long Walk, released in January 2012. The album catapulted the band back into the limelight. However, the album also sparked the wrath of the new government. 2012 was a big year in the rocker movement. It was the year of the Johnny Silverhand-inspired Arasaka riot in Night City, in which 17 people died in the costliest incident of rocker vandalism to date. The Watchmen were released from prison, having spent the last 5 years in Braindance. Their first new album was entitled Betrayed. It was considered a failure until 6 months later, when the entire band was assassinated by a Swiss solo who was rumoured to be a member of the Vatican's secret police. Wax Trax Records, an ailing independent label, signed the Sinning Fetex. They were the first real grind tech band, ringing in the new year with full leather jacket. The album celebrated the gang culture and was the first artistic expression of the techno-humanist movement. The Sins were the first to use interface-controlled sampling and mixing live. The sounds of everything violent from bone saws to the subsonic hum of AV engines were in the mix. Boosters and beavers alike bought into the lifestyle. The first single, oddly enough, sung by the band's manager, the now famous promoter Vampire Elton, Violent Hickey set off a wave of killings wherever the band played. The band's look, half-chromed bodies with rippers and shark-rin vampire implants, is still fashionable today. The Sin's second album was released in 2015, entitled I Am the Machine. It clarified the philosophical points of techno-humanism. The album was much less openly violent due to the entire band's intensive therapy. It was also a retrospective of the grind tech sound, a descendant of the 80s gothic, industrial and angst styles, all bled together and spat out against a wall of pain. In 2016, rockers moved back from preaching to protest, with the advent of nanotechnology in the general population terrifying many people. Stranger Inside Me, a band specifically targeted to the anti-biotech audience, released the disc Humanity. Songs like Bright White Smile, Every Fourth Child and Helix told the real story. Biotech takes away from our humanity and makes us something else. As a result, some people still won't eat government-inspected kibble. In the course of their 2017 American tour, all 4 members were killed or maimed. 2017 was mysteriously quiet in the music business. It turned out to be the calm before the storm. By April of 2018, the rocker world shook on its foundations. DMS, the first commercial braindance label, released the debut disc of Kid Rock, a 14-year-old child prodigy. Legend has it that Kid Rock was found wandering the research complex at DMS Manhattan. He asked to be a rocker and said he could operate an Omnimax. When Kill Webster, DMS's head tech, hooked him up, the kid made history. The disc is only 18 minutes long, but the intensity is unparalleled. All 18 minutes are one song, entitled Kid Rock's Bleeding Soul. Braindance is too expensive to be a high-penetration market tool as yet, but Kid Rock and several other artists in the field became a force to be reckoned with. Unsurprisingly, the figurehead of the Rocket Boy movement is Johnny Silverhand. Johnny Silverhand is known in Night City as a famous and idealistic singer with his signature silver chrome cyber arm. His band, the Samurai, were a group of rebellious musicians whose music focuses around revolt and a distaste for authority. Johnny Silverhand's discography includes notable hits such as Chippin In and Never Fade Away, which are songs the player will hear while traversing Night City in Cyberpunk 2077. They offer a melodic reminder to the historic troubles that have plagued Night City. Other songs from his Cool Metal Fire album include Dancing With My Axe, The City, and Flashing Lights. Rocket boys such as Johnny Silverhand or Kerry Eurodyne challenge the authority of the social elite by inspiring and informing people. Music has historically been able to resonate with those wishing to express social and political dissent. On many occasions, music has galvanized rebellious youth to challenge the status quo. The Samurai originally had 5 members, Johnny Silverhand and Kerry Eurodyne, who would later become well-known solo artists, as well as Nancy, Denny and Henry. The Samurai started as a backstreet bar band playing various clubs in Night City, such as the Palladium, Destiny and Nexus. One night at the Rainbow Cadenza, a wild-eyed person who looked like a dwarf addict approached Johnny Silverhand and Kerry Eurodyne wanting to book their act. Naturally, the Samurai thought this guy was so high on dwarfs that he was talking nonsense, until he gave Johnny Silverhand his card. The man was none other than Jack Masters, the head of Universal Music. Within 3 weeks, the Samurai was signed to Universal, had a record in production, and were preparing to tour every major city in the world. It took the Samurai only 3 weeks to achieve their first #1 hit on the Euro radio charts with their single Blistering Love, followed by their debut album 2 weeks later. Despite their outstanding success, the Samurai disbanded due to an incident with their keyboardist Nancy. Nancy unfortunately fell in love with a dwarf addict who physically abused her and wanted her to quit the Samurai. Nancy, who had been a Booster Gang member prior to joining the Samurai, decided enough was enough. Following another incident, she threw her fiancé out of their 83rd story penthouse. While Nancy wished to rejoin the Samurai, her 7 months in jail caused the Samurai to become apathetic, and the members concluded it was time to part ways. Nancy changed her name to Bess Isis and began to work in the media. Henry stopped playing bass after an accident with a human interface prototype. A spike in the voltage jumped circuits and literally rewired his brain. Denny decided to form a new band called The Mastermind. Shortly after the Samurai broke up, Kerry Eurodyne and Johnny Silverhand were looking for solo deals. An attempt was made by EBS Records executives to blackmail Johnny Silverhand. Hoping to force Johnny Silverhand into signing a solo contract with EBS, the MediaCorp threatened to reveal that the singer was in reality an AWOL US Marine who had deserted during the Second Nicaraguan conflict. Johnny Silverhand outmaneuvered EBS by going public with his now famous Sins of Your Brother album, which revealed his secret and brought to light the plight of veterans of that covert war. Not only was the EBS threat blunted, but the album triggered a wave of sentiment that resulted in the National Amnesty Program for AWOL Central American Conflict veterans. As Johnny Silverhand himself remarked, if you can face the truth, you can face anything. So, I faced the truth. In an alternate timeline to Cyberpunk 2020, a different version of Johnny Silverhand exists. He was possibly born as Robert John Linder sometime in the 1980s, the son of an Apple computer programmer and studio guitarist working the San Francisco club scene. Linder's family is rumoured to have been killed during the collapse. Records appear to indicate Robert joined the US Army in 2004, training as a cybergrunt soldier in the Special Operations Branch. Now, it is assumed, thanks to Johnny Silverhand's participation in the amnesty of 2009, that Linder either went AWOL from Nicaragua or was assumed missing in action early on in the war. But it is equally possible that the man known as Johnny Silverhand only assumed the identity and dog tags of Robert John Linder. He could have been someone else all along. Taking on the appellation of Johnny Silverhand after the trademark chrome cyberarm he adopted in 2005, Linder embarked on a successful career as a rocker boy. With his band The Samurai, he penned legendary tracks such as Chippin In, Metal Soul and Never Fade Away. In 2019, lightning struck Johnny Silverhand in the form of a botched Biotechnica-sponsored assassination. What is commonly believed is that Johnny Silverhand emerged from hiding nearly a year later to release Clone Wars, a highly political concept album detailing the abuses and dangers of human genetic tampering. Where the Johnny Silverhand narrative diverges from the main timeline is that the assassination was partly successful. Johnny Silverhand's body was torn in half by an improvised explosive device that ripped his AV-7 apart. Johnny Silverhand lay near death in a cryogenic tank for nearly a month before his location was found by the ghost of Alt Cunningham. In this timeline, Alt had cloned herself a new body, the Alt to Cunningham. Alt offered to upload Johnny's ghost to the net, then download him into a new cloned body. Johnny Silverhand agreed. 8 months later, Johnny Silverhand appeared at a press conference to release the delayed Clone Wars album. As Johnny Silverhand knew he had been put into a cloned body, in many respects this gave special poignancy to his work. However, this second version of Johnny Silverhand was a subtly changed man. Having stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale, he became more political. Johnny Silverhand's next 4 albums, Ring of Fire in 2021, Surrender Gold in 2022, Media Gods in 2023, and Street Armageddon in 2024, covered the gamut of the political spectrum. In this timeline, rather than being killed when attempting to save Alt Cunningham from Arasaka, in 2026, Johnny Silverhand began working on a new album, Tomorrow's Child, which aimed to expose the government for its inhumane treatment of children affected by carbon death plague. In retaliation, the American government had Johnny Silverhand assassinated. Alt Cunningham steps in and creates a clone from the frozen tissues and ghost of the original Johnny Silverhand. Unfortunately, as it was the original Johnny Silverhand, he had a 7-year memory gap. Alt this time told Johnny Silverhand the truth, that he was a 3rd generation copy, and if he so wishes, was practically immortal. This Johnny Silverhand called himself Mr. John Silverhand, and thus the saga of Johnny Silverhand continues. Hey Chumba, I'm Kazuliski, and I hope you found this Cyberpunk 2077 discussion on the Rocker Boy movement and Johnny Silverhand to be informative. Are you interested in more Cyberpunk 2077 content? Then be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you for chipping in.